Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Morning Show, the top morning show in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines, and most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak to transportation professionals on this show, as well as my twice-a-week long-form podcast, because I want to put the right information out there from the people who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. It is Monday out there right now, you guys, and I got a guest coming on today. We're going to talk about like what's actually going on in the freight market and what's going on from all the businesses. And there's a ton of data that's being thrown out there right now, and we're going to break down some of it here. Tracy St. Clair coming in over on YouTube. Good morning. Corey Buchan, happy Monday on YouTube. Sonny Sharma, good morning. Orange Shirt Gang. Bill McIntyre, good morning, everybody. Robbie Page, good morning. Hope you had a great weekend as well, coming in over on LinkedIn. So yeah, you guys, we're going to break into it. We're going to talk some of this stuff down. And without further ado, I'm going to have my friend Kevin Hill with Brush Pass Research come back on. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hey, you got it, Chris. Always a pleasure to be joining the Freight Coach Show.
No, man, I appreciate you taking the time. You've been putting out a lot of phenomenal data as usual. And we were talking about this when you were on my podcast. It's probably been a month and a half or so ago. And, you know, the data that is out there right now it's interesting, right? Like I truly think that we are about to embark upon a market that I think, unfortunately for some, they've never experienced before. And it's going to be a lot of, it's a lot of learning coming up here from some individuals.
It is, you know, it's fascinating that it's a market that a lot of people haven't seen before. I was talking to an executive at a larger brokerage, and we were talking about whenever the upturn comes, what's his biggest, what might be the biggest challenge is like, I've got a lot of people here who've never seen a tight market. And I was like, wait, we just went through a tight market, didn't we? Just a couple of years ago. But the turnover is cycled out through all the carrier salespeople. Either they've left the industry or they've been promoted to account managers, but people on the phone talking to the carriers didn't even see 2021. Yeah. I mean, it's been a full turnover cycle, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, I personally look at it like this, Kevin. You could say that in those times a couple years ago that the market was kind of tight, but the big difference is customers were paying exorbitant rates.
Yeah.
So you could cover the freight. You got a lot of leeway in your capacity and when you were able to get trucks in there. And then from a pricing standpoint, there wasn't really a negotiation in the sense, because if carriers needed $8,000, they were going to tell you that, and then you're going to quote your customer based on that. I think a lot of what is going to happen for those who haven't worked in that market before is when a carrier tells you $2,000 and you want to pay $1,700, you better book them at $2,000 and move on with your day, because it doesn't get cheaper, right? And it's going to be a very challenging time, because I think that the sentiment that I see out there, and I'd love to get your take on this, is people think this market's going to flip and all of a sudden there's going to be a floodgate of opportunities and freight that's going to become available. And it's actually the opposite of it. Like, customers are not going to be opening up their doors to anybody and everybody, because there's not an increase in freight volumes that is going to come here.
You're exactly right about that, right? It's not going to be like the pandemic, or it shouldn't be like the pandemic, when you had this surge of load volumes, right? And, you know, what's the extra $1,000 for the truck? I need to get $80,000 worth of goods on the shelves, be sold, because it will be sold. So it was a very wild days back in 2020 and 2021, where you'll see yeah, just book the load, go on. You're not going to get a huge rate increase. It's going to be delayed, and it is going to be a tight market with tight, tight carrier negotiations and tight shipper negotiations as well. And you're going to get squeezed in the middle, and it's going to be harder to find capacity.
Yeah, it really is. And because I think that this is going to be a really delicate balancing act for a lot of individuals, because I look at it like this. I've been heavily prospecting for the last, we'll call it 15 months now. I've been holding myself accountable every single day. Even though I'm not getting a ton of response, even though I'm not getting a ton of conversion, I'm continuing to follow up every single week, month, every 2 weeks, whatever that cadence looks like for those out there. And I'm starting to see a turn and a change in tune of the things. Like, they might be good right now, but they're like kind of direct and like, hey, follow up in 2 months and stuff like that. So the tone has changed. And I think that there's a lot of sales reps out there who wait for an event to begin to start prospecting and get out there and start talking to people, because like, where, and again, this is just coming from a guy who's moved a couple of truckloads in his career. You're in a really tough spot if you have a lot of your freight accounted for by a couple of accounts, right? And I think the biggest enemy out there to most people, whether from a new business development standpoint or an existing business development standpoint, is everybody's kind of good enough, right? Like, everyone's providing good enough service. They're providing good enough pricing to where they don't necessarily have to look out. And then as a broker, you get complacent because you know what? You're doing pretty good. Your sales managers aren't looking at your numbers in a bad way because you're doing good, all things considered. They're not checking your KPIs to see if you're making outbound calls or outbound emails or scheduling site visits. They're not doing all that because you're making decent money. But if you don't adapt coming up here, if you don't change your ways on how things might be heading here, because all signs are indicating that things have switched and things are flipping. If you're not going to change your ways and you think that you're going to hold out, the leash for service failures are all but gone. So if you fail on a load for a couple of days, like, you're going to be out. And then your entire book is going to be possibly gone overnight. And I say that not as a threat to anybody. I say that because I've been in that situation before where I thought I was good enough. And then the largest account, we kind of took their business for granted. And then boom, it was shut off overnight.
Yeah, customers will churn. It's not if, it's when. They will churn at some point. Everyone churns. If you have a highly concentrated, if you have one or two pieces of business that account for one or two accounts that account for 90% of your business, you're in trouble, right? Because that will go away. I've seen it firsthand. I've experienced it, but I've really seen it firsthand when it really took a hit. Someone was banking a great commission check each and every month, and then took it for granted. Did some things they probably shouldn't have done, especially if it was a new account, and all of a sudden, no commission checks whatsoever at the end of the month. And it was a total blow. It was tough to see, your salary or your income gets cut and by 60 or 70% overnight. And, you have this thing too, even without complacency, is like you earn your customers' trust. That means you can add a little bit more premium on your loads, and you should, right? Because they don't have anything to worry about. You're going to take care of everything. But as that relationship gets stronger and you add a little bit more premium on it, someone's going to come in, undercut it. And at some point, they're going to go with a cheaper option, and you are left holding nothing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Robert Bain, let's go, my guy. What is that, man? It was great seeing you too at Manifest, man. It was awesome. I love it when people stop me like that. I love meeting people who view the show and everything. Thank you for tuning in. And Mark Groves, what is up? Good morning from Chiefs Kingdom, he says. If you guys didn't know, Taylor Swift's boyfriend won the Super Bowl last night. Flo, good morning to you. And then Robert Bain says, in cyclical markets, you have to be nimble, period. Data allows you to increase your nimbleness regardless of org size. I think that, because from my perspective, I think that another challenge that I want a lot of people to be aware of here is people pull their data. So I think a lot of shippers are going to be looking at their freight rates from February of 2023 compared to right now. And they're going to be like, we want to hold firm, or they're going to be like, hey, we paid say $3,500 on this lane last year. We want you to be at 3,200. And some people are going to instantly agree to that, like no matter what. But where we are right now is and again, you guys, this is from my book of business. This is from the freight that I'm moving and the conversations that I'm having. Rates are going up. They're not coming down. And you need to be aware of this, because it's like, I always look at it like this from a rate increase or a rate decrease perspective. I would always rather be the first one to the party. So it's like, if I'm going to a customer, like we all see the data, right? Where now we're paying 35, we're getting quoted 3,500. It's a break even and everything else. I would rather be the first one to raise my rates to a customer and say, hey, I got to be at $3,800. Again, this is all hypothetical examples here, you guys. I would rather be at $3,800 first and then temporarily lose the business for a couple of weeks, because I'm not going to sacrifice service. Because that's really what it boils down to is it's your service ability at that point, because you're going to deal with this. And then essentially what happens is they'll go with the cheaper rate. Everyone's got a business to run. I get it. But what happens is then the service failure kicks in, and then the customer eventually comes back to you. It might be 3 weeks. It might be 5 weeks, but you're in a good position to where you can actually continuously move that freight at a high level. And then you do that a couple of times. That's where the trust comes in. Like when I describe to people all the time, price becomes secondary. That's what I mean by that is when you go to them in either direction, your customers are going to be like, yeah, we get it. We know you're a little bit higher, but like your service backs it up. We can justify it at that point. And I think that that's going to be a big gray area for a lot of people here when customers are pulling last year's data and they're seeing it at, they want to go in a little bit lower. And then we're seeing it out there on the open market, like, hey, rates are actually on the contrary. They're actually raising here.
Yeah, you have to be willing to. Number one, good to see Robert Bain in here. Always great to see him. You have to be confident in your market calls, right? And that's the reason why you have to know the market. You have to know rates. You have to feel for that. And once you have that, you can have the confidence to say no.
Yes.
To be willing to lose the business for a couple, 3 weeks, because you know what's going to happen, because it happens every time. When we say customers will churn, they will churn, right? They will come back too, right?
Yeah.
Because we can all talk about price, and they're going to talk about price. They're going to beat you up about price.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they're worried about their service levels to their customers.
Correct.
And that supersedes price in a lot of ways, but they're going to be a little bit tight, as you said, because you don't see the surge in load demand, load volumes, right? It seems like we've been teetering on a recession for a year now or more. Yeah. So there's not a lot of surges in load volumes. Everything's pretty steady as it goes. Capacity is tightening up, right? It's going to push rates higher. And that's going to be much different than 2020 and 2021, where you had this huge load surge and you could just buy trucks.
Yeah. And it is, right. And this is, kind of, again, we're describing what I mean by everybody's good enough. Everyone's good enough right now. And that's why it's like, I can't stress this enough to people is you're never good enough in business. Okay. Because, and I talked about this a little bit more in depth on last Thursday's show, but I won't dive in deep again, but it's like, you brought up the fact that customers, leaving and stuff like that. Like that is out of our control, right? Like I don't take anything personally. If a customer cuts me off without explanation, so be it. That business is business, right? At the end of the day, there are so many different reasons on how business can come and go. And that's really what I mean by like, you're never good, right? And when I mean good, like I'm not talking about from a performance standpoint. I'm talking about from a business development standpoint, because I have legitimately seen customers leave for a myriad of different reasons. And then you're sitting there like, how did 80% of my book of business leave overnight? Like, you have to constantly be prospecting and following up. And sorry, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh no, a lot of times that's reasons that you said outside of your control, outside of your visibility, outside of you doing anything wrong whatsoever. That the person that you have a great relationship with at a shipper gets canned, or
Yeah.
they leave to go to another job. Someone else comes in, that they get bought. You can come up with 100 different reasons that have nothing to do with you whatsoever that causes change in an organization. And if you're not prospecting, going back to your point, if you're not consistently prospecting and bringing on new business, bringing on new opportunities, you're going to get stuck.
Yeah.
With going from the hero to a zero in the office and on your bonus checks, commission checks, how you get paid very quickly. It's 100% guaranteed.
Yeah. And this is, because you put a post up, and again, if you guys aren't following Kevin, follow Kevin Hill, Brush Pass Research on LinkedIn. I love the information that he puts out there all the time about this stuff, because you would put something out. It might have been like last week or maybe 2 weeks ago about the freight brokerages, how 8.4% of freight brokerages, were closing up shop. The latest count from the FMC shows that is a year-over-year decline. And when I saw that post, and now I'm thinking about it right now, like, I wonder how many of them were in the position that we're describing right now, right? Where it's like they got a couple of early wins with some customers, which is great, but then circumstances outside of their control hit, and then they were out. And then before you know it, they're out of business and stuff like that, because, again, we talk about cash flow in it, but that's time for a different show. So when you're talking about that data, Kevin, the 8.4%, brokerages are closing up shop, is there any revenue indicators that are associated with that number? Like, hey, these were at 10 million top line or anything like that?
I think the majority of those are going to be smaller brokerages, maybe 1-2 million, maybe 500,000, probably $1 million or less. The people who got in during the pandemic, what you do see is the average lifespan of a brokerage from its birth to its death, right? In certain categories, we're cut in half in right now, right? Because of all the new entrants that came in 21 and 22, or 20 and 21.
Yeah.
You see that from about, and I forget the exact days on that. I posted it a couple months ago, but it was cut in half.
Yeah.
So you're seeing, early entrants and early exits a little bit more. But I would say, if you're running something $1 million a year in gross revenue, based on 2 or 3 accounts that you got during the pandemic, those are going to those have churned, right?
Yeah.
You can't get away with the same pricing and economics. You got to go into more of your traditional business cycle, where it's tough margins and it's tough go at it. And if you lose that, what's your incentive to rebuild your business again?
Yeah, it's tough. Sean Smith, what is up? He says, preach that revenue diversification. Sean Smith with Denim, you guys. If you guys want a solid factoring company out there, hit up my man Sean. He can show you what they have to offer. You did mention in that post as well. I actually copied and pasted this post because this is how much I wanted to talk about it. Is there's still 17% more freight brokerages than there was in January? Was it January of 2021? At that time, even though there was an 8% drop. So again, like, attrition in the industry, you guys, and this is another thing about to kind of tie into how we always got to keep prospecting and everything else. How many times are people going out of business, or sales reps because I've seen this, you guys. I've worked for a big box broker before. Sometimes when sales reps leave organizations, the business doesn't stay inside of the organization, or somebody might stop reaching out to that account for whatever reason. So it's like, this is why the opportunities are always going to continuously be a part of it. And, again, this is like, we're looking at it like there's, 25% more freight brokerages, well, minus the 8% that had left the market recently. So we're still at 17% higher of brokers that are in the market right now. And that's a lot. But again, how many of them are tied into 1 or 2 accounts? And, and then furthermore, like, because you guys, again, I'm not here to preach fear or anything like that, but if you're not smart with your money, it's challenging to run a business, right? Like it isn't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden you raise $100 million. Like it's kind of been glorified out there. If you're out there bootstrapping dollar in, dollar out, it's extremely challenging to make it. And then we're in a very tough economy overall right now. So it's like there's that. No, I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm not advocating for anybody to lose their business or to go out of business, but I wouldn't be surprised if in 60 more days here, Kevin, you're going to put out another post like, hey, actually, out of that 17%, there's only 10% left or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It's been running, mid-single digits on up for the last 7 months, year over year. I would imagine that we're going to hit double digits at some point in 2024. And if you look at 2 years ago, so in 24, 22, right? If you look at January of 22, there's 3% less.
Yeah.
Freight brokerages, right? So you're seeing this rolling average kind of come down. I mean, a few months ago, that 3-year number was 30%. It's come down to about 17% now. So you're seeing that rate of freight brokerages closing up shop accelerate. And if you look at pre-pandemic versus the beginning of this year, you had a 10% or 10,000 more freight brokerages, right? But that doesn't really account for the 25,000 new MCs that were printed during the pandemic, right? Yeah. So you had 25,000 and only 10,000 of those are still operating. So you're going to see this massive, just like the owner operators, right? The owner operator numbers, the new MC authorities for carriers coming down pretty rapidly. And what that does with capacity, does a company driver move over, get a new MC, brand new, that doesn't add a driver to the pool. If he closes up shop, MC number moves back to one of the big fleets as a company driver. That doesn't really take a driver out of the capacity pool. So it'll be interesting to see. But as you said, a lot of the new entrants didn't have time to build up an extensive, diversified book of business. So they got some freight. They were moving it, and with a market turn as sudden and as dramatic and volatile as what we've seen in the extended period of it, building up that book of business in this market to replicate what you had during the gravy times, is difficult, if not impossible, for most people.
Yeah, because I mean, you put out a post, I think it might have been on Friday, about. And again, you guys, this is why I love following Kevin, and I'm very glad that he gets to come on the show, is because if we're talking about freight opportunities here, Kevin put out a post about the top 1,000 freight brokerages that were out there, about the loads per day, and that they control anywhere from 250,000 to 300,000 loads per day. This is all estimates, of course, and that the top 7% of this group control 70% of those daily loads. While the industry is highly fragmented with 28,000 brokerages, scale is highly concentrated at the top. Because to me, it's like, I mean, that's a lot, right? Like the top 7% control that. That's wild to me.
It really is. I mean, if you look at the top 20, and that encompasses most of the top 20, let's say the top 40 brokerages out there. You think about it, C.H. Robinson's, TQLs, the JB Hunts, the RXOs, billion plus in gross revenue. They account for, I think the mean was 1,800 or so loads per day. You come down to a $10 million brokerage, and you're looking at about 40 loads per day, which is still really good money. Yeah. But there's a lot of freight out there. It's very concentrated to the top.
Yeah. No, it really is. And I copied and pasted this post for you, Kevin. So it said the top 5% move an estimated 1,836 loads per day, while the bottom 2/3 of the 1,000 largest move a median of 41 loads a day. So it's like, again, and if we're looking at that, 250,000 to 300,000 loads a day is what the top 1,000 control. That might seem like a lot, and it is. Don't get me wrong. That's a lot of freight. But that's not all the freight. Okay, that's not all the opportunities that are out there. And, again, there is a growing thing, because I look at it like this, and I'm not here to shit on any companies out there that are moving freight, but there's a point where people want to talk to people, right? Like they want, and then like as businesses grow, sometimes there's an overinvestment in technology, right? Where they're
Mhm.
removing that human to human interaction that comes along. And the larger you get as a company, sometimes you lose what got you that business because of that personal touch, that attention to detail and
Mhm.
everything. And again, this is no fault to anybody, but this is kind of the reality of things. And I remember hearing when I worked for, I'm not going to mention their name, but when I worked for a very large broker, when I was out there cold calling, oh, you work with who? Yeah, we don't work with you. And this is why. I never hear that or heard that as a small company. I actually heard the contrary, like, wait, who the hell are you guys?
Mhm.
But that's actually a good sign because you have an opportunity to lay the foundation of how you're going to service them as an account. So it's like when you see numbers that like out this and there's all these large companies that control a lot of it, that's a very real thing, but it's also not a bad thing to be unknown out there in the market because you have an opportunity to prove yourself.
Yeah, and a lot of the freight that they control are those large enterprise accounts that need a lot of technology, that they need a lot of integration. And it's something that if you have a smaller brokerage, you're not going to be able to get. And what they have problems with are the SMB shippers, right? The small and medium size, because they don't offer that service that you're talking about, or it's inconsistent, you know. And I think it's the natural evolution of all businesses in all industry is that you have to be really great to get to the point of doing $1 billion a year, right?
Yeah.
But then you're handcuffed because you lose all your flexibility, your nimbleness. You have to have a certain type of customer that really moves the needle,
Correct.
um, and that makes all the other shippers out there who don't fit that profile, you know, whether you lose them or not, it doesn't really matter. It's not
Yeah.
really going to hit the bottom line, so you don't have that constant care and contact. But if you can focus on the S&P shippers, right, and offer that great service, then you're going to beat the big boxes every time.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And a lot of people look at their CAC, which is customer acquisitions, like what
Yep.
their cost of customer acquisition is you do reach that point where it's like you hit a certain level and you're like, listen, it's not that we don't want to move that freight, but 5 loads a month doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily move the needle at a certain point. Because if you're looking at your strategy, everybody identifies who is my core customer competency. All right. Who do I want to go after? And like you did a breakdown as well about like 70% of the freight out there is dry van and so on and so forth. So it's like some people are going to look at that. They'll look inside of their niche and then they're going to decide, hey, we're not going to work with any shippers that are below, hypothetical example, $50 million a year in revenue. We're not going to touch that. We're going to stay in the $100 to $500 million mark because they have anywhere, again, hypothetical, anywhere from 5 to 50 loads a day. That is our strategy. That's where we need to be. That's what we need to go after. That's the business that we need to develop. So it's like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, what you're really saying here, you guys, is that small to mid-sized market, and I agree with this sentiment, is always going to be the greatest opportunity from a business development standpoint because they get all the attention at the school dance when the market sucks, but when there's any changes, everybody runs away from them because they don't need
Mhm.
them anymore, right? They want to go after the
Exactly.
customers that pay them the most money. So from a biz development standpoint, ladies and gentlemen, that is where the truest opportunities will lie for you. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, it's definitely where the best opportunities exist. Unless you have the tech to integrate completely and move 50 loads a day seamlessly, right? But you can leave that game to the other people, to the top, the top 50 freight brokers out there who are set up to do that. They're not set up to worry about each and every SMB shipper out there. If they're moving freight with them, that's great. You need X number of loads per day from 1,000 reps or whatever. But they're not gonna show them the care and consistency that they really need.
Yeah. Couldn't
And that's where
agree
you can
more,
step
man.
in.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why Freight Coach Logistics is there to serve all your flatbed needs, ladies and gentlemen. But hey, Kevin, as always, man, I appreciate you jumping on the show. How does he need to reach out to you to find out more about what you guys got going on at Brush Pass?
Yeah, the easiest thing is LinkedIn, Kevin Hill. Just DM me, connect. Always open to all of that. Or you can drop me an email at kevin@brushpassresearch.com.
Perfect. Kevin, as always, thank you so much for joining me here today. And as always, you guys, we'll be back tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central. We'll be breaking down some industry headlines on there. I got a guest coming on Wednesday. But as always, if you guys got value, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network, because at the end of the day, if you saw value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.